you'll have the main character and then the carbon copy, right? Mm-hmm. And we say like, well, this guy, Blue Beetle himself, his design is almost like symbiotic in a sense, but what looks intimidating to that? And then Carapax is like brutal. So we took a lot of inspirations from different things and kind of combined it to make it work eventually.
First of all, Phil, Mike, thank you so much for joining me. 9B Collective, you guys did the concept art for Blue Beetle. I saw the movie twice. I absolutely loved it. I think that this is one of DC's better origin stories. We were just talking about this off screen. It's one of their better origin stories, and I love the family element. And it's great seeing diversity on screen. There's literally, I think Susan Sarandon's like the only white person in this movie. Like it's filled with different faces that I love seeing. Can you guys break down the collaboration process with Blue Beetle, with director Angel, and talk about how the concept art kind of fits into everything, and also the production process and on working on everything?
The process for that was actually really intuitive and very organic. Working with Angel and producer John Ricard, they kind of brought us in to kind of, we were brought in as a special case to be like a conceptual hub, but mainly to bring in diverse voices, right? So that was like most of the team that we had on 9B was Latin. And it was specifically for that reason, so that we could work with the creatives, that were on the project, but make sure that there were diverse voices. One of the key things for us that we try to do is make sure that we're not only having diversity on the project, but making sure that they have equity. And so they literally had a say. And Angel was very open with collaborating back and forth and finding cultural references, which obviously came through in the film with the family and all the references that they had. He just wanted it to feel as authentic as possible. And that's why we were there.
That's amazing. Now, Mike, can you talk to me about why it's so important to have Latino artists working on this and how it influenced the concept art?
Oh, most definitely. One of the biggest things is like me and Phil have been in the industry for a while. And a lot of times we see content that made the people working on a project don't reflect the culture of the content. So one of the big things that we notice from the outside even is like, we'll see something that doesn't feel authentic, right? And we know from jump that Angel and his team really wanted it to feel very authentic. That was like probably the first thing that he said. So we were like really excited because we're like, we get to actually be in charge of doing the thing that we've wished we've had the opportunity to be a part of, right? And so it was so efficient, so quick, and also really inspiring, because one of the biggest parts when it comes to concept art in general is research, right? And a lot of times it takes you longer to research something than it does to actually draw or design the thing. So what happens when you don't have to do much research, right? They're just like almost getting to that point of, there's kind of like dance. It's like you do 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 when you're uncomfortable with the steps. But when it comes to you actually being very familiar, you're like kind of flowing with it. And that's what we got to see with the team. The team just was like flowing with it to the point where they were coming up with all these references that we had no idea. Phil and I were like, that's dope. That's cool. That's cool. And it was just really inspiring to see how far and fast they were able to get from point A to point B.
The Blue Beetle costume itself looks like it jumped right off the pages from the comics. It's so classic to what I was used to seeing with Jaime Reyes' character from the DC comics, that it looks, and it's practical, which is also crazy to me. But the first concept art I saw of it, I was blown away. Can you talk to me about the inspiration for the Blue Beetle suit, Jaime's and Ted Kord's suits as well?
We really wanted it to be authentic, and we wanted to pull as much from the source material as possible. One of the things that me and Mike both have seen in our careers is trying to be comic book accurate and authentic, and watching things just go off the rails where you're getting further. And as a nerd, we're both going like you're watching it change color and all kinds of stuff, which we were like, no. So it was really important for us to pull directly from the comic books and look at like what he looks like and try to pick and choose the best things, but also kind of infuse it with some realness and infuse it with something that would translate practically. And so what was really great about that is once they brought in Maya Rubio, costume designer, and her assistant costume designer, Daniel Sellen, it was a really great and important process for us to kind of work with them to try to make sure that everything stayed authentic and as true to the character as possible that we had in the conceptual stage. And then watching them kind of translate it over was really great. And I actually had the opportunity of being an assistant costume designer. So that was my first assistant costume design credit. And it was really great for Maya and her team to kind of just to watch them kind of, everybody was really excited about trying to be as authentic as possible, but also making sure that he looked like Blue Beetle. Like we really, that was a key thing. But my thing has always been the cinematic version, right? So it's like you're in live action, you're translating and providing something that you can't get from the comic book or from what you had before, but it's important for that to look like the coolest version of what you could have imagined from that thing, from the source material.
Did you guys also do the concept design for Carapax as well?
Yes,
we did.
Now, talking about, because that kind of, you talked about this earlier, Phil, about kind of like derailing a character from the source material. I actually think this works better cinematically for Carapax's character in the OMAC suit. So Mike, can you talk about using Carapax's different design and how maybe this isn't quite the comic version, but it's definitely an influence design of tech. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so one of the cool things that happened is we're using a lot of metaphors when it comes to a lot of these characters. And Carapax specifically, we looked at the comic and we're like, that's cool and all, but that translation might be kind of weird. So we were like, all right, you know what? Let's take the essence of what Carapax is. And one of the big things was like recognizing stuff like architecture and saying like, well, there's brutalist design, right? And maybe in the sense of what this character is going through, it is quite brutal how he's being formed. So we took like brutalist design inspired by the original comic, and we kind of started to like find this really cool spot of finding something that feels unique, but also like making sure that that thing looks almost menacing to Blue Beetle, right? Because one of the big things that we've seen in many movies where you'll have the main character and then the carbon copy, right? Mm-hmm. And we say like, well, this guy, Blue Beetle himself, his design is almost like symbiotic in a sense, but what looks intimidating to that? And then Carapax is like brutal. So we took a lot of inspirations from different things and kind of combined it to make it work eventually. And we felt like it really showcased on screen.
I want to add into what Mike was saying too. There was one note specifically from Angel that was really important for us. That was his note, even if it didn't translate or if they didn't say it, was that Carapax has to draw energy from outside of his body to funnel it out, but Blue Beetle or Jaime's energy comes from the Scarab and comes from within. So that was the juxtaposition. So visually, we tried to expand on that.
Yeah,
that's incredible. I would love to see those OMAC suits going forward in James Gunn's DCU. Now, the one thing that shocked me about Blue Beetle's suit was that there was a practical design, and for the most part, that was used in the film. I would have assumed that was a CG suit, but it looks so incredible in person. Can you talk to me about the most challenging parts of designing the Blue Beetle's suit?
Yes. I think that practical suit design is always really challenging and difficult. And I think it also really comes down to the choices you make. So Maya's and team were really like specific on like the colors and like what types of colors and what types of textures, right? And so she was really kind of hands-on with making sure that those were correct. But then also it's about who manufactures and builds it. And so we have to get a shout out to Ironhead Studio for that. Iron just does, I mean, if you look them up, they've done everything known to man. We're led by Jose Fernandez. Their team was really instrumental in the sleekness of the suit and making sure that the suit came out correct. And if you actually get a chance to see the suit in person, the engineering of it alone, I think that was probably the hardest part, was just getting, his legs to stick to his sides and like all of this stuff. And like, how big is the Scarab and how big is the backpack? And then how does it work for stunts? And like, where are the tentacles going to be, or we call them as pinchers, like where's pinchers going to be? So there's all of those different avenues to it. That's a really technical suit. I think the hardest thing was probably getting the helmet correct and making sure that it's as close to Xolo's head as possible to make sure that it didn't look too big. That was probably one of the harder things to do, but they do it well.
Mike, I want to talk a little bit about Ted Kord's costume, because were there any designs that we didn't see that didn't end up on screen? Because one thing about this film is that if you're a Blue Beetle fan or even a DC fan, there's tons of Easter eggs in this film. Obviously, Ted Kord's cave or lair would be one of them. What were there any other designs for Ted Kord's suits that we didn't see in the film?
There were quite a few things that you guys didn't see on screen for sure. I think Phil could speak to it better, but there's definitely quite a few things that were missing.
We live that NDA life. So yes,
Yeah.
I will say that one thing, the little Easter egg in there that I think some people caught, but people missed was you see the mannequins and then you see one of them is empty. And that's because Ted Cord had it. But then there was also the fact that it had the pillow on it because he had gained some weight. So that was like lean to like fat Ted Cord.
Yeah.
But there was a few things in there for that. And that was just something that I know that we will probably be seeing more of that down the line.
I certainly hope so. I got to ask you, because this has been a big debate at Screen Rant, is who would you guys like to see cast as Ted Cord? Now, I know that for me personally, I know Jason Sudeikis was a name that's been going around, but who's been at the top of your guys' list as your fantasy dream cast of Ted Cord?
Honestly, that's one of my favorites. Yeah.
I was gonna say, I was like, that to me was like the nail on the head for me. I was like,
I've seen a few others. I think because he kind of, it's interesting because he doesn't necessarily have to be the action hero-y kind of like badass guy. He's more quirky.
Yeah.
So there's been a few others, but I liked Jason. There was one other one though. I can't think of his name.
I've heard Alan Tudyk, who was in Firefly with Nathan Fillion. I heard that he's been thrown around.
People tried to cast Nathan as him for the longest time too, though. So that was Nathan was another big one. Yeah, I can't think of it. It's an interesting thing because I think it would depend on the way that they've set it up in the universe now. It would depend on how that actor plays off of everybody else, since the family is super important. Because actually, one of the things that was a surprise for us was George Lopez.
Right.
Lopez, they had him in mind, but it wasn't initially him. It was going to be somebody that was skinnier and more skinnier and wiry, right?
Really?
Oh yeah. So his look and the mullet and all that, just imagine like an aged like Mexican rocker.
Right.
And then George came in and kind of like, and then Maya's like was doing the fittings with him and everything and like kind of going back and forth and they were finding his character. Those elements strangely still worked and it was just hilarious. Like it was just
he killed that role.
Yeah.
Definitely. I love the family element. I think that they really make the movie for me. I took my kid and her friend to go watch the movie. They loved every second of it. It's such a great family film. My question for you, how different is it working on a fully original project versus a superhero project like Blue Beetle or Black Panther or Moon Knight that have comics as their source material?
Oh, it's very different. I mean, even like looking at like span of time, like if something say came out in like the 20s or 30s, and then you're like working on it now, there's so many different nods that you have to like kind of pay attention to, but still like make sure that you're coming up with something new. I think when it comes to working on something that already exists, like an existing IP, there's a lot of pressure because there's so many different fans, and it's usually not just comic book fans, right? Like, funny enough, you'll see, say, a Moon Knight costume, and then the comic book fans will fill away. Then the Marvel normal movie MCU fans will fill away. And then there's the average Joe who fills away. And so there's always like a weird thing of trying to bring something that already exists into the modern, even though it doesn't work all the time, right? Or something is so bare bones, usually in comic books, it's like an abbreviated design, right? Where you're trying to like understand what the original creator was looking into or thinking about. So like sometimes it's much easier, at least to me, to create something like from scratch because there's the pool is wide open, the world is wide open. But when it comes to like designing something from existing IP, you're working within a lot of limitations, which usually limitations are the best thing for a designer, or probably for anyone really. But it's very imposing, to be honest. Yeah. But usually I think it really works out best when you're able to look at not just look at the design, but look at what the person who originally made the design was actually referencing or thinking in their head rather than like what you're seeing on a page.
Phil, a quick question for you. I know that in the past for other projects, we've seen concept art with whatever actor may have been auditioning or different things like that. When you guys did a concept art for Ted Cord, did you draw an actor that you had in mind, or was there any suggestions for an actor to kind of place into that suit? And if so, can you give out any names, or is that something that you can't talk about?
No, actually, it's usually standard for us to pick someone. In this particular instance, that concept art was done by David Mason. Shout out to David. and working with Maya's back and forth. And I think with that one, I don't know if they picked someone specific. I feel like it was more generic because we didn't have cast. Oftentimes we'll try to pick someone, like I know for before Raul was cast as Carapax, we were using Oscar Isaac as a reference. And so it's like there's always someone that we think of to put in, you know, in place of, or like to try and think, or sometimes that'll actually, like you can see with Rosario Dawson with Boss Logic, he drew her as Ahsoka and now right. So it's like that'll happen sometimes. That's happened actually throughout both of our careers where we've drawn someone in and the director's like, who is that? And then it becomes interesting. They may not even be cast as that person, but it'll translate later. I know for me, I drew on Days of Future Past, I drew Jamie Chung as Jubilee. And then they took Jubilee out, but then later on she went on to play, I forget who she played. Did she play Polaris, or she played someone, or she played one of the comic book characters in another show, an X-Men show. So that happens all the time.
So you guys are like the influencers of the influencers for some of these actors on getting their roles. Back to the original works. You guys are also working on Rebel Moon. I know this was originally pitched as a Star Wars story, but how are you setting it apart from that universe visually?
Visually, I think that leads to what would you say, Mike, to Zack?
Definitely leads to Zack. I mean, tonally, it's definitely an ode to like some of the more darker Star Wars tales. But it borrows from a lot more. I would say that like from what we were able to see, even like in the trailer, you can see that it's not just referencing Star Wars, it's referencing the things that Star Wars also referenced.
Sure.
Right. Sure. So there's a little bit more fantasy involved in that. And it's like a lot more clear. Whereas I almost feel like Star Wars does a good job at like kind of dusting off the trail a little bit. But that's all I think I can say.
Can you guys talk about working with Zack Snyder and collaborating with him in creating this world? Because Zack's a visionary, and I feel like he's one of these guys that already has the look and aesthetic in his head. And it's just about bringing that to life. So can you talk about working with him as a collaborator?
Zack, I've worked with several times. I worked on Justice League, and I can't remember. And Man of Steel. And Man of Steel was my first time working with him. He's wonderful. He's super. He's super collaborative, and he's also very, very kind. I think, but he's also got a lot of energy, and his vision for things, like the way he sees things, is kind of amazing. Like it's like being around that energy, just as like, especially as an artist, makes you want to draw more or makes you want to do more things because of the way he looks at stuff. I think that. In particular, for Rebel Moon, we didn't really collaborate with him directly. We collaborated with Stephanie Porter, who's the costume designer. Right. So we were working and kind of helping her flesh out the world. And I know that the way Zack works specifically is he does big, broad fan out. Like he's like, okay, here's the general gist of what I want. Here's the coolness of the character. And he's very specific about those things. But then he lets you kind of play and fill in the gaps. And so as a creative, I guess the best way I could describe Zack is he's a creative amplifier. He takes what you have and he doesn't suppress you. He lets you expand out and it makes you want to work harder, but it also allows you to grow as an artist while then kind of playing in this world that he's creating. It's really kind of fascinating, but great.
You said you worked with Zack on things like Justice League, and I know that Zack has put out a ton of information about it, from the plot lines to different storyboard, I guess, art that he had. Did you guys get as far as designing some of the characters that were included in the film that we never saw, like the Riddler or some of those other characters that Zack said that were going to be included in Justice League Part 2 or any of the other future Justice League movies?
No, personally, I was just on it for a little while to just kind of fill in some of the gaps and kind of like expand. Like I worked a lot on the Amazons for that one. But yeah, no, just more or less, that was just, it was like, there was things going on. I think there still might be some things that are happening, but I think it's, for the most part, he's been very open with kind of trying to say like what they were trying to do. And I will say that I know working on that film was very difficult to watch it come out because there was so much, like, I'm glad he got a second chance at like showing what it was. Because there was so many things that he had there initially that were already there that were taken away, and it just made the film not make sense. So I was glad that they were put back.
So there's more possibly coming out from Zack's DC run?
I don't know. I have no idea. I know that there's a lot of things that you haven't. There's still stuff that wasn't seen, but that's just the way Zack works. He's like a balloon of ideas. So you probably will never get to see as much as he had planned.
Now, you guys have worked on a ton of DC and Marvel characters. Who of both are from those pantheons of great heroes and villains did you like working on the most? And are there any other characters you'd like to take a crack at in the future?
As much as I can say, my favorite project really honestly was working on Blade, for sure. But whenever that comes out, and second will probably be Captain America 4 when that comes out. But working on Blade is Blade, right? Like, he's the coolest superhero out there. And I also just remember feeling like this is similar to what most of the artists most likely felt working on Blue Beetle. That's what I felt working on Blade.
How can James Gunn set his DC characters like Superman and Batman apart from past incarnations while staying true to their original designs?
I think that for Gunn, I have a lot of faith in him just because of like his track record and the way that he does characters. He really finds the heart of the characters, and he does, for me, he does ensemble cast better than a lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
Like, there's always these movies that have a ton of superheroes in them, and like it's really easy to get lost, but he finds the core root of each person where I'm like, I don't ever feel like any of his characters are being dragged behind on like the little bus or whatever. Like, I feel like always like they're front and center, and he finds the core of them. So I don't know how he's going to translate it, but I have faith in it that he's going to do a good job. Like I'm just waiting to see how that's going to pan itself out. Because I think what it'll be probably for him, the core root of anything, the way he'll separate it is story. Yeah, I think story first, everything else second. So I feel like that's going to be the core of it, is his story will be strong. And of course, the visuals and everything will follow suit. But I think his story is going to be what separates it. The
last question I have for you guys, I know that your third partner is Aldous Hodges. He's incredible. I love talking to that dude. But he's also he's a geek. Like, he's definitely a geek, and he's ingrained into the culture. He's voiced Jon Stewart, the Green Lantern, and he's played Hawkman. Have you guys ever done any designs as him as a live action Jon Stewart? Because I think he would be perfect for Jon Stewart if they're really rebooting DC and he doesn't carry on as Hawkman. And the second part of that question is, would you rather see him play Hawkman or another character like a Jon Stewart?
Ooh.
Oh, that's so hard.
So rough.
That's a hard one. I mean, Jon Stewart is like one of my favorite characters.
Same.
In the DC. So I'm biased by saying I would love to see him play Jon Stewart. But yeah, that's a hard one.
I'm biased, and I'll just say I would love to see him be the first actor that plays both.
Actually, yeah. I think it will be, to be honest, it'll be really fun to see him in his bag as whoever he wants to play. I think Correct. It's like really what it is. Because similar to what the last question was, it's like there's a difference when you're doing something because you're told to, and you're doing something because it's something that you actually really want to do. And I think that, like, if he had a choice, I think that whoever that choice would probably be the best. And it'll be really interesting to see him shine at his brightest.
Have you guys ever, just by the off chance, drawn him as the Green Lantern and like concept art and just presented it to him?
No, we have not. Some other artists have, though. That has something that's happened. I think that for now, I mean, like just personally, I know that I feel like Hawkman is not done, and I'd like to see more of him. Yeah. I think that he was exciting, and I think he gave a good performance. All of those things, not just because he's my friend, but because I think he actually did. And so I would like to see that story continue, but we'll see.
I agree with you. I really liked Black Adam, and I felt like at the end of that movie, it felt like DC started getting everything together and moving in a singular direction. And then it just kind of didn't happen with everything else that was announced. But look, thank you guys so much for your time. I would love to talk to you guys again about Rebel Moon. The film looks fantastic and so grand. And I know that Zack's a visionary, and you guys do phenomenal work. So I'd love to chat with you guys again once that film comes out. But thank you guys so much for your time. I really appreciate you guys taking the time out and talk with me.
No, thank you very much. This is much appreciated.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it. Thank you.